Okay, welcome back after the very short coffee break. I'm sorry for that, but I hope you found the talks interesting and worthwhile. So our next speaker is Merel Ritzkes-Heutinger, and she is a veterinarian and has a PhD, and she has been appointed professor in evidence-based transition to animal-free innovations at Utrecht University in the Netherlands since last year, June. And since her graduation as a veterinarian in 1986, she has been committed to the goal of implementing the 3 Rs and improving the quality of science and animal welfare. And her aim is to obtain results that are more translatable to the clinic. And Merel has been a manager of animal units, both in industry and academia, nationally and internationally. And throughout, she has been dedicated to education and research in laboratory animal science, 3 Rs, and systematic reviews for animal experimentation. And her current focus has shifted towards transdisciplinary education and research on how to make the evidence-based transition towards replacement fast and effective. Merel, I hand over to you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Kat. Can you hear me and see my slides? Can you just confirm? Okay, so thank you very much, Kat, for inviting me and for this nice introduction. And I will try to guide you through my working life on my thoughts and ideas on how to effectuate the 3 Rs a little bit better than we have done so far. Kat already told you about my new professorship, so I won't repeat that. I also have an honorary professorship in Denmark next to my professorship in the Netherlands. What am I going to present to you these coming 45 minutes? First of all, the circle of my working life. How did I get here where I am today? Then my experience is that striving for the 3 Rs in itself lacks effectiveness, and the PhD by Judith van Luik confirmed that idea. Then some words on the impact of systematic reviews who lead to the direct implementation of the 3 Rs and a lot more. And then the history of preclinical systematic reviews that show limitations in quality and translation of animal studies. And last but not least, I will inform you on the movement in the Netherlands, the transition to animal-free innovations, and our attempts to accelerate this. This is my working life cycle, and it starts at the top with a literature review on atherosclerosis in the rat. During my last year at vet college, I studied a lot of literature on the use of the rat as a model, and that made me choose to work in the field of laboratory animal science, to work towards better animal welfare and better quality results and better relevance for humans. At the time, I still believed that many animal studies translated well to humans, so I moved on to work in the field of refinement at Utrecht University and did my PhD there. You see that on the right top. After my PhD, I moved to the Unilever company, where I became the head of the animal unit and animal welfare officer. There I learned about good laboratory practice guidelines, and I thought that was an impressive quality step that I hadn't encountered yet at academia. After 5 years in industry, I wanted to go back to academia and then moved on to University of Southern Denmark and became the head of the animal unit, combining it with a professorship in laboratory animal science. The aim of that was to implement the 3 Rs in the daily management of the animal unit. After 10 years in Denmark, I moved back to the Netherlands, where I became the head of the central animal facility of the Radboud University Medical Center, again combining it with a professorship to implement the 3 Rs in the daily practice. I founded the 3R Research Center, and after that, I founded Circle, focusing on preclinical systematic reviews. The outcome of systematic reviews have made me choose to work in the field of alternatives now, so replacement alternatives. So I'm back at Utrecht University, focusing on replacement now and taking part in TPI in the Netherlands, which I will explain more about later. Being the manager of an animal facility and having a professorship in lab animal science, I asked myself the question, how can we implement the 3Rs better? I founded the 3R Research Center with support from the license holder at the university I was working then, the Radboud University. In 2006 and 2007, we got 30 questions per year when the service was for free. But then the license holder said, now you have to earn your own money. And then from 2008, we got no questions anymore. And I asked researchers, why don't you come back? And they said, because it's cost money. We don't have money for the 3Rs. And that made me wonder, because the 3Rs are part of our legislation. So we have to fulfill the 3Rs in our legislation. So we continued doing research in that. And Judith van Luik did a PhD into the effectiveness of 3R literature searches and 3R implementations. The main conclusions were that there is no time nor budget for the 3Rs, even though the 3Rs are a legal requirement. We also found that there were more than 100 3R databases and websites with content that differed and search strategy that differed. So the search felt like a mission impossible. So we then wondered what to do next. And then I came across the topic of systematic reviews. And then I thought, this is a much better solution than striving for the 3Rs. And I will show you our experiences with that. First of all, we saw that at my university, we had a greater reduction in animal use than as compared to the rest of the Netherlands. I compared two periods, 1998 to 2005 with 2005 to 2014, where in that period from 2005, I started working in Nijmegen at the Radboud University. In that period, we had a 35% reduction, and in the Netherlands as a whole, in the same period, there was a 15% reduction. It may be that this is the effect of performing more systematic reviews, as at my university, we did more systematic reviews than in the rest of the Netherlands. And when I talked to one of the clinicians about it, he said, of course, when you do a systematic review, you're not doing animal studies. So where do systematic reviews come from? The Cochrane collaboration was founded in the beginning of the 1990s and refers to evidence-based medicine. The logo on the left is in the middle. You see the first meta-analysis ever performed. A meta-analysis is all the statistical analysis together of individual studies. What this first meta-analysis demonstrated was that the use of corticosteroids to mothers giving birth to preterm infants led to a significant reduction of the deaths of these preterm infants. If you look at the square at the bottom in the circle, that is called the diamond, and it is left from the vertical line, which means that the deaths of the preterm infants were significantly reduced. I've been told this was the first time that evidence was generated about one therapy in the clinic. So since the beginning of the 1990s, we do systematic reviews routinely on clinical studies. The Cochrane has given the following definition of what a systematic review is. A systematic review attempts to identify, appraise, and synthesize all the empirical evidence that meets pre-specified eligibility criteria to answer a specific research question. Researchers conducting systematic reviews use explicit systematic methods that are selected with a view aimed at minimizing bias to produce more reliable findings to inform decision-making. You can find the free e-learning that Circle made at the EdPlus training platform. And EdPlus stands for the European Training Platform for Laboratory Animal Science. It is for free. It takes about 1 hour, and then you go through all the steps that you do in a systematic review, and you see the steps on the right mentioned separately. So it is a structured way of making sure you find all the literature on a certain topic and make an objective analysis and a critical analysis of all the evidence that is out there. So systematic reviews bring us the most objective and complete scientific evidence, but strangely enough, are not yet mainstream preclinically, in contrast to the clinic and evidence-based medicine. And even though many animal studies are performed with the aim to improve human health. I will now show you some examples how systematic reviews contribute to 3R implementation. First of all, the model system choice can be based better on evidence through systematic reviews. This slide shows a model published by Rob de Vries on using animal models for cartilage degeneration in humans. If you look at the figures on the right, on the top, you see the word osteochondral lesion. If you make a lesion in the cartilage of a rodent joint, the lesion will always extend into the bone, which means there is a fast blood vessel ingrowth and it will heal fast. The figure on the bottom right talks about the partial thickness lesion. In humans, there is usually a lesion in the cartilage only, and that has a very slow blood vessel ingrowth and a very slow healing. So what we see is that models are often chosen on the basis of evidence, of tradition instead of evidence, and systematic reviews can help us to reverse that. And it is wise to start with the human disease when you choose your model system. And the conclusion of this systematic review was that the rodent is not a good model for studying tissue engineering for cartilage degeneration in humans. It will lead to fast healing and possibly a good publication based on positive results, but not relevant for humans. Then, how can systematic reviews help replacement? Systematic reviews want you to phrase the research question precisely. And for that reason, it is wise to start with the human disease and ask patients what is important to them. The James Lind Alliance in the UK is a partnership between patient organizations and funders. And together they formulate a top 10 for certain diseases. So what should we focus research on? One of the nice examples I came across was on asthma. Asthma patients said, we don't want new drugs. We want to learn to breathe better during asthma attacks. And so a clinical trial was started with physiotherapy to learn how to breathe better during the asthma attacks. And some people even cured from their asthma thanks to this therapy. And that led to avoidance of animal study altogether. The surgery department at the Radboud University Medical Center did a systematic review on chemotherapy and intestinal wound healing. They found that 88 out of 1,342 studies repeated the adverse effect of chemotherapy on this wound healing. And hopefully this systematic review will help to prevent that this particular goal in research is not repeated again, because we now know that this effect is repeatable. A very unfortunate benefit of systematic review is that we create transparency on quality of reporting, and that is not a positive picture that arises. On the top figure on the right, you see we score whether people have mentioned whether randomization and blinding has been performed as the starting points of our scientific practice, whether sample size calculations have been done, and you can add more factors that are relevant. You see a lot of red in that figure, which means it has not been reported. If it has not been reported, you cannot reliably interpret the results. And that is illustrated in the figure under B, under risk of bias. So the risk of bias indicates whether the results are reliably interpretable or not. And you see a lot of orange, which indicates the risk of bias is unclear. So in all the systematic reviews that we have done so far, 50 to 80% of publications on animal studies lack essential details, unfortunately. In Denmark, we did a study on the reporting quality in preclinical animal experimental research and compared the years 2009 and 2018, because the ARRIVE guidelines were published in 2010 and were endorsed by many journals, and we had expected to see an improvement in the quality of animal study publications. However, we only saw very small improvements. So obviously, this does not really do the work it has to do, that we have reporting guidelines and that we have to live up to them. This is quite worrying, I think, in our scientific practice. Many animal studies are performed because we want to protect humans. Are we really protecting humans with animal studies? Retrospective systematic reviews on preclinical evidence can provide us insights there. The efficacy of nimodipine as a drug in stroke patients was tested in a clinical trial, and the clinical trial revealed no effect of the drug. The clinical trial had been based on positive results from animal studies. So the medical doctor Janneke Horn decided to do a preclinical systematic review to find out what was going on. And then all animal studies together also showed there had been no evidence in the first place to start this clinical trial. A similar thing occurred with safety and side effects of antithrombotics in stroke patients. These drugs caused severe side effects in humans. These side effects had not been found in individual animal studies, but when all animal studies had been analyzed together, similar side effects were found. So we could do a better job by doing systematic reviews before entering clinical trials. And then how do we look at animal studies? Because we wish to protect humans. The British Medical Journal did a study on translational transparency and found a pick and mix approach of how animal studies had been used. A tuberculosis vaccine was tested in children in South Africa and provided no extra protection. It had been expected on the basis of animal study results that this vaccine would cause extra protection. Again, a retrospective systematic review of the animal studies revealed there had been no basis to start the clinical trial in the first place. But more worryingly, certain animal studies had been left out in order to obtain funding and ethical approval. And so that's why the British Medical Journal called this a pick and mix approach. And by asking systematic reviews, we can avoid such pick and mix approaches. And we have written an editorial with this British Medical Journal story to improve the conduct, reporting, and appraisal of animal research, at least give advice on how to improve this. I've talked to many fundamental scientists who think that systematic reviews is not for them. However, we did a systematic review in Denmark on fundamental neuroscience and found new results and new insights thanks to this systematic review, and also got a good publication out of it. So also for fundamental science, it is useful to look what is already out there in the literature, and if you can build further on the already existing evidence. At my group, Circle, we were very lucky to get funding from the Dutch health funding organization, ZonMW. They funded education, coaching, and research and development of tools and methodology from 2012 to 2020. The funder wanted to know what the impact was of performing preclinical systematic reviews, and this has been published in PLOS ONE. First of all, what did the grant scheme look like? The grant scheme made funding possible for education and training. Participants could receive grants to participate in workshops, and also participants could organize workshops fully funded. Then, if people were interested after the workshop, they could apply for coaching for performing their own preclinical systematic review, and the coaching was paid for again by the funder. Then, to identify the potential impact, an inventory was done, questionnaires were sent out, and interviews were performed to establish the impact on research and on researchers. Here you see the results of the inventory. The number of the average refers to the mark we got from the participants on the satisfaction of the one-day workshop they attended. And so in general, they were quite content with this workshop. We totaled 21 workshops in the Netherlands with a total number of participants of over 385 people. Of those participants, 88 applied for a preclinical systematic reviews with coaching. At the end of our impact study, 38 preclinical systematic reviews had been published, and some were ongoing, some had been stopped, and some never started, and some went other ways. So again, this grant scheme made workshop possible and coaching, and so participants could perform their own preclinical systematic reviews. Then what was the impact on researchers? The conduct of systematic reviews made them gain skills, insights, and realize some aspects of research already. The researchers indicated they were confronted with badly conducted or reported studies. They indicated they changed their opinion regarding animal research overall quality. It was worse than they had anticipated. They learned new skills and understood the value of systematic reviews. And they gained new insights in their fields, like finding data gaps, finding new knowledge, and confirming or refuting theories. Then people also realized the impact of research on animals and their own past mistakes. The impact on research was that the conduct of preclinical systematic reviews influenced that at 3 levels: the lab team level, the field level, and the science community level. At the lab team level, it changed how people wanted to plan, conduct, and report experiments, and also how they transferred knowledge within their own teams. At the field level, they said it brought new insights It inspired for doing new systematic reviews and primary studies. And people started writing opinion papers wanting to advocate for change. And at a science community level, people indicated they wanted systematic reviews to become a requirement for ethical applications and funders applications, which was quite surprising, I must admit. And they wanted more training and education. Here I published some quotes from the interviews that I thought were quite remarkable. I was quite shocked how poorly designed some studies are while still being published in a high impact journal. You retrieve papers that you were not aware of, even though you're quite familiar with the literature on the topic, you will always find new things. Step by step, you can do a lot of research in humans that is also very helpful. I did a lot of animal experiments, and yeah, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going back to animal experiments. I think training is most powerful because it's difficult to change the behavior of the old researchers. But the young researchers you can definitely train. They can become knowledgeable in this field. One of the founders of the Cochrane, Sir Ian Chalmers, also founded the James Lind Library, which is information for patient organizations. Sir Ian Chalmers invited Pandora Pound and me to write a historical account of the development of preclinical systematic reviews in the UK and the Netherlands. And the title of this article has become The Role of Systematic Reviews in Identifying the Limitations of Preclinical Animal Research. It shows the deficient quality of publications and the low translational value. But it also shows the historical development, both in the UK and Netherlands, with initial resistance to this new methodology and then moving to gradual acceptance. You can also find these papers in PubMed. It has been republished in 2 parts in the Journal of the Royal Society of Medicine. In one of the research projects I was involved in, we wanted to know whether we could predict the translational success from animal studies to humans. Katelijn Leenaars did a scoping review on reported concordance rates in the publication. So concordance refers to whether animal and human study results are the same or not. And we looked at what researchers themselves had been publishing on this concordance rate. You see in the figure on the x-axis the years, and on the y-axis the translational percentages that have been published. It shows that translation can differ from about 0 to 100%, and that the number of studies has increased over time, but that we do not see a higher translational value. Katelijn Leenaars also tried to identify predictive factors for translational success, and we could not find these factors. I also published an article in Research Outreach on the value of systematic reviews, because I see a lot of polarization of people on the one hand thinking animal studies are so important for human health, and on the other hand, the ethical problem with using animals. And often these debates are stuck in emotions. And I really think we can get better informed debate through the use of systematic reviews. So we can get the evidence on the table and the facts on the table next to emotions, which are, of course, also there and should be there. So all in all, results of systematic review show a low publication quality and low translation of animal studies to humans. To me, this indicates a need for change. But changes coincide with resistance. We're only human. So it needs perseverance and managing of transitions. And so in the past years, I've learned a lot of new things which are called transition signs. This slide deals with transition signs. It's called the multi-level perspective transition analysis. In the figure on the right, you see a lot of arrows. Don't read all the text. It simply means that there are a lot of processes going on that all influence one another. The word niche innovations in the bottom of the figure refer to new biomedical innovations, like, for example, developing organoids. In the middle of the figure, you see the word socio-technical regime, which refers to, for example, our legislation, what animal studies are required by law. On the top, you see the socio-technical landscape, which refers to our society at large, politicians, and society at large wants safe drugs, but also ethical use or avoidance of use of animals. So what you try to do in transition analysis is to identify barriers, leverages, and opportunities at these three levels. The ultimate goal is that you try to identify opportunities where you can make accelerations in this transition. TPI stands for Transitie Proefdiervrije Innovaties, in Dutch, the transition to animal-free innovations. This program has been ongoing for a number of years and has been initiated within our ministry. The current mission is to make better prediction without lab animals. The ambition is that the Netherlands, with TPI as a catalyst, can make the international and national transition happen towards animal-free innovations. The partner program was founded in 2018 and 11 partners have become a member, and this includes a young TPI organization. So young people below the age of 35 can become a member of this organization, which is a very dynamic, energetic group of young people. The TPI policy is maintained in conjunction with the 3Rs policy to still ensure animal welfare as long as animals are needed. Here you see the stakeholders that participate in these TPI meetings. So we meet on a regular basis and discuss what we can do together to make this process move. So university organizations are here, funders are here, NGOs are here, ministries are here, Young TPI is here. And so there we discuss mutual action. TPI wants to reach out internationally as well, which is logical because Holland alone can, of course, not make this happen alone. And it is written here a European approach, but I would stress this is also a global approach that is crucial to validate, accept, and implement non-animal methods, NAMs. So TPI is planning to start conversations with other EU member states to start off with about validating NAMs, to find common ground on what is needed to improve validation in order to accelerate national and international efforts. And so feel free to contact Erika van Oort, who's the program manager at the ministry, if you're interested in this program. I also heard Jared Bailey mention the helpathons, which have been very successful in reformulating research question to moving from animal studies to studies without animals. Recently, a target image, as we call it, has been published on moving towards animal-free education. This is called the Ambition Statement on Innovation in Higher Education Using Fewer Laboratory Animals, which has recently been accepted by the boards of the University Organization in the Netherlands and the Organization of the University Medical Centers. So this statement is out there now, and now the challenge will be to implement this in our daily practice at academia. A few years ago, I was so happy to experiment with the multi-level perspective transition analysis together with my colleague Ingrid Visseren from the Radboud University, who is a specialist in environmental governance and sustainability, and also in transition analysis, and I, who are more specialized in biomedical science. And then we worked together with 10 students in an honors class on accelerating the transition to animal testing-free medical science. It was an extremely interesting experience and stimulating experience to see how hard we worked together and co-created the education together. If you're interested, you can read everything in the Animals Journal on identifying key factors for accelerating the transition to animal testing-free medical science through co-creative interdisciplinary learning between students and teachers. This work also resulted in a funding application which has been awarded, and we are now working on a 5-year project to study this acceleration. So my conclusion of all what I have experienced so far is that we need mixed methods research and flexible approaches, where we combine quantitative and qualitative research. This needs interdisciplinary research and transdisciplinary research. Transdisciplinary research is interdisciplinary research that also reaches out to society, because science is here to serve society. So we should also stay in close contact with what society needs and wants. And why do we need mixed methods research? Because providing scientific evidence is clearly not sufficient to make real changes. One of the examples I learned is from Thomas Hartung, where he told me about the monocyte activation test, which has been validated 25 years ago and can replace the rabbit pyrogen test. First now it gets incorporated in the European Pharmacopoeia. So it takes about 25 years before that gets into legislation. That's why we need social sciences, because why does this take so much time, and how can we speed up those processes? So everything that is happening at the moment, which is a lot, I think is really promising and also showing that transition is happening. The pharmaceutical company Sanofi Aventis announced their goal at the Falasa conference in June 2022 towards global commitment to 50% reduction in animal use in their company in the years 2020 to 2030. The FDA has approved the first clinical trial without demanding new animal tests and base this on NAMs, so new approach methods, non-animal methods. And this was a clinical trial on an already existing drug that is used for a new goal, which is called repurposing. An article by multiple stakeholders on building scientific confidence in NAMs has been published in the Archives of Toxicology, and that addresses exactly what transition science is talking about. In Europe, we've had a European Citizens Initiative and a European Parliament resolution asking the European Commission for a roadmap to phase out animal studies and phase in new approach methods. The FDA Modernization Act was passed, where alternatives are also being acceptable. The European Medicines Agency has a 3R working party, also aimed at stimulating the implementation of replacement and the 3Rs. And then the European Chemicals Agency, ECHA, has a NUM workshop now coming on 31st of May and 1st of June, where a possible roadmap will be discussed. So I think in this era, we should use the modern technologies more now that they are here. The artificial intelligence is one of the very promising things happening. We are working at algorithm to search replacement papers in seconds from PubMed. So in seconds, it searches through 35 million papers. We have published the first, Sorry,
Meryl, just time. We're running out of time. So just
okay.
If you can wrap up. Thank you.
Yeah, let's see how far I am. I think I'm nearly there. Yeah, I'm nearly there. So have a look at this website and see if you can use that. And if you want, give us feedback. This is another e-learning that is free to use on searching for existing non-animal alternatives, and also explains the different types of replacement that are there. So not only one-on-one replacement, but also complex replacement and rephrasing research questions. So this is my last slide. I think it is time to start phasing out animal studies and embracing alternatives as soon as possible for the benefit of animals, but also for humans. And the science and technology are here to do so. So we need to keep asking questions and walk the new academic pathways, include more evidence in our decision-making, have transdisciplinary research and education and connecting all stakeholders, and use the multi-level perspective and the transition science in this whole scene. So thank you very much for your attention, and the floor is back to the chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Merel. That was wonderful. And now I'm looking forward to our panel discussion.